To oppose this manifest thuggery, we must not be cowed by the charge of racism. Indeed, if we are going to talk about racism, then the shoe is on the other foot. In the Middle East, the standard term for a black person is abd, Arabic for slave. In his seminal work, Race and Culture, Thomas Sowell estimates that 14 million sub-Saharan Africans were enslaved by Islam. While slavery was officially outlawed in Saudi Arabia in 1962, clandestine dealings continue to the present day, as they do in Libya, Yemen, and other Muslim countries. It is well known that Qatar and Dubai use Ethiopian slaves to build their stadiums. In Sudan, slave raiding was endorsed by Omar al-Bashir to destroy Christian opposition to his rule. To quote Charles Jacobs from October 2002, quote, "In Khartoum, a Taliban-like Muslim regime is waging a self-declared jihad on African Christians and followers of tribal faiths in South Sudan. Non-Arab African Muslims are also targeted for devastation. 2 million people have been killed, more than in Bosnia, Kosovo, Somalia, Haiti, Rwanda, and Burundi combined. Tens of thousands have been displaced, and 100,000, according to the US Committee on Refugees, forcibly starved. Western lack of interest is all the more stunning as Khartoum's onslaught has rekindled the trade in black slaves, halted, mostly, a century ago by the British abolitionists. Arab militias storm African villages, kill the men, and enslave the women and children. In these pogroms, after the men are slaughtered, the women, girls, and boys are gang-raped, or they have their throats slit for resisting. The terrorized survivors are marched northward and distributed to Arab masters, the women to become concubines, the girls domestics, and the boys goat herders." Unquote. This is the legacy of Muhammad, who never lifted a finger to abolish slavery. On the contrary, he was a slave trader himself, and codified slavery as an Islamic practice. For example, he decreed that 2 black slaves is the equivalent of 1 non-black slave. The racism of Muhammad is on full display in the Hadith, in which he describes Ethiopian men as having heads like raisins and interprets the appearance of a black woman as an omen of an epidemic. It should thus come as no surprise that at the close of the Hajj pilgrimage each year, black pilgrims who have been trampled to death are piled on top of each other like yesterday's garbage. The racism of the Arab world is summed up well in this video.
Between the 7th and 19th century, Arab traders captured millions of African slaves and shipped them out of the continent. Slavery was not formally abolished in the Arab Gulf countries until 1970. Many contend a modern form of slavery still exists there today. The Arabic word for slave, abd, is commonly used as a racial slur. The Middle East history of slavery, the casual racism, particularly against Sudanese or Nubian people from the south of Egypt, and the depictions of black Arabs on screen are interwoven. But, as many Arabs often say, the context is different. Is it really fair to compare Arab slavery and blackface with their Western counterparts?
I am sure that when people object to the idea that blackface is offensive in the Middle East, they're saying we are not talking about the American South, we are not talking about plantation slavery, we are not talking about the same kind of abuses or the same scale that happened in the southern United States. However, the slave trade in the Middle East was huge, and the cultural impact of this slave trade has everything to do with blackface in the Middle East.
Nobody has ever discussed any of that, and nobody has ever acknowledged this very dark and shameful history. So, we keep shaming the Americans and the Europeans for whenever they do anything racist, but at least they've somewhat come in terms with their dark history, or at least they're trying to confront it and face it head on. Whereas there is no acknowledgement whatsoever of our shameful role of what happened to Africans earlier in those centuries, at these times.
العالم العربي بيحتوي على ثقافات وديانات كتير طبعا.
In the Arab world, we have a range of skin colors from black to very pale white. Our preferences as Arabs, which align with the standards around the world, is that the whiter someone is, the more attractive they are. I have personally received a lot of comments, like, the night has come early, or I get called Shikabala. Shikabala is a black footballer, and I shouldn't be offended, but the name is used in a derogatory manner to offend me. There are lots of sexual remarks related to black stereotypes. People have pulled my hair, spit on me, and thrown things at me. People talk about me as though I don't understand Arabic, as though I don't know they are commenting about me.
To stop the advance of Islamofascism, we must dramatically curb Muslim immigration. This is something which other European countries have begun to realize. Indeed, after the conquest of Mecca, Muhammad decreed that migration had been superseded by jihad. Thus, whether or not they are conscious of it, all Muslims who emigrate to the West carry the imperative to spread Islam. Those who are most conscious of this imperative become community leaders. One example would be Omar al-Qadri, Imam of the Al-Mustafa Islamic Center in Blanchardstown. In this video, Qadri urges Muslim immigrants to exploit Ireland for its economic benefits, stating that the best migration is for Allah.
There is nothing wrong in coming in this country for fulus, for finances. Nothing wrong. Anybody said that's wrong, he doesn't know Islam. It's only wrong if you come for fulus and for that you give up your identity, your deen, your Islam. That is haram. That is forbidden. Then you should be ashamed. If you come here and you say, I am Qadiani, I am a Mirzai in Pakistan and they are killing me and you are lying, that's haram. You're giving up your religion. But if you're coming in as an asylum seeker for any other reason, you're not giving up your identity, you are proudly Muslim. And you come here, even for passport, khair, it's perfectly fine. The best migration is for Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But anything else, it's not haram. It's not forbidden.
The jihadist imperative manifests itself through demands for Sharia courts, through the use of public spaces as mosques, through attacks on freedom of speech, and through the sexual abuse of young women. Indeed, the rape of vulnerable women by Muslim grooming gangs in the UK is arguably the most appalling scandal of our time, not least because the police and the government have done their utmost to cover it up. This was the case in Rotherham. To avoid causing offence to the Muslim community, over 3 decades, the police turned a blind eye to the rape of 1,400 young women. On a national scale, almost 19,000 children are estimated to have been abused by these gangs. There are some who question whether we should frame this issue in terms of Islam, but the plain truth is that Muhammad and his successors took sex slaves. In the Quran, these are referred to as those whom your right hand possesses. In the Hadith, it is described how Muhammad married Aisha at the age of 6 and consummated the marriage when she was 9. Given that Muhammad is held up as the best example for Muslims to follow, it is not surprising that we have rape gangs with a predilection for young women. The problem is spelled out by the victims of these gangs, as well as some genuine moderates from within the Muslim community. This is a clip from BBC Newsnight, aired in January of this year.
Being in Rotherham is a reminder of the horrific scale of what happened in this town. 1,400 children were raped, abused, trafficked, beaten, passed around. And that astounding number is believed to be a conservative estimate.
This grooming gang survivor calls what happened to her anti-Western religious and racist abuse.
When I was a victim, I was raped multiple times, I was beaten, I was tortured, and throughout all of that I was constantly being racially abused. There was a constant barrage of, you're a white slag, you're a white whore, you're a fucking gory, which is the Pakistani word for white person. So the racist abuse was non-stop. The religious abuse is real. Like, I was taught it as a type of othering, like our Pakistani girls are good and pure and they cover themselves, they're virgins till they're married, but white girls are trash, they're whores, they all sleep with hundreds of men, they're all worthless. I don't think it's good to hide this information.
The problem here is that these people have been raised up to see the non-Muslim community as kafir, as infidel, as unworthy of living on God's earth, etc., etc. When you categorize people as kafir, non-believer, then use this word in a derogatory way, then you start to underrate them and look at them as less a human being, or perhaps not a human being, not a people worthy of respect, and therefore you could do anything.